The DLLS Dallas Stars podcast, and you are looking at this correctly. This is Sam Nestler and Craig Ludwig only. Welcome to the DLLS Dallas Stars podcast. We have Elijah, aka Off-Screen Queso, back here running the controls. Our pal Owen Newkirk is out using some PTO. So for some reason, let's just start it off, Let's. Why did DLLS think it was smart to do a podcast, not only one, but three, with just me and you in charge?
Well, I'm thinking apparently because they listen to all the comments and the quotes, and the listeners have spoken, and they've probably had enough of Mr. Owen for a period of time here, and so they probably prefer that we just chat about it. And the other thing I heard, I got a text message. I think it was from Owen at about 3:15 this morning, and I think he had too many cocktails. I didn't know. I thought he was just not going to make it into work today. So I didn't know this was scheduled.
No, this is scheduled. Yeah, he's out there living the dream, doing his spring break. I think he's in Maine. I'm pretty sure he's still in Maine. So
listen then, all the people out there that have any nasty comments and thoughts for Owen, today is the day that we could maybe do a Q&A or just send your comments our way.
Yeah, I'm looking at the comments. I'll be following them as best I can. So send in anything you want us to talk about, because otherwise we're going off the rails from the start here. But I do want to talk about something important before we completely go off the rails. And that's something me and you have been texting about a little bit. Are the Dallas Stars better or getting any better right now? Right. We're looking around the league. Teams are making moves. The Stars were unsurprisingly quiet on day one of free agency. We're not expecting a ton necessarily to happen going forward here. As of now, the only things they've really done is they've added Radek Faksa, they've re-signed Colin Blackwell, they brought back Ben, Duchesne, Lundqvist, and Bork. They lost Marchment, they lost Brendan Smith, Cody Ceci, obviously Granlund and Blumel we just saw signed. So question, let's start easy, lads. Are the Stars any better, or are they worse than they were when they finished the season?
Well, I mean, I think for me, it would be hard to say that they're better. I mean, if the best case scenarios, they're the same. I mean, are they better by subtraction? I don't know. I mean, you could argue that, Mason Marchment, again, I said this plenty of times. I like him. I think he's a good player. It does. And we saw what that line was capable of doing when everybody was healthy. I mean, they were the best line for a long time. So, and were there penalties and things like that was taken, or was he just a casualty of, the salary cap, and when you look at that, and I believe he didn't have a contract after this year. Am I right?
He did. Marchment had one, I think it was his last year this season.
This would, yeah. So they would have to re-sign him. And then there was the whole Jason Robertson thing, obviously. And I guess that's kind of calmed down. We haven't heard anything there. So it's hard for me to say they're any better. And that doesn't mean that with a new head coach that there can't be some renewed enthusiasm and things like that. The other thing is can a couple guys take another step? Can Bork take a step this year?
Yeah.
Can Sam Steele take a step? Will Sam get elevated a little bit because of what's going on down the middle of the ice? And I think we're kind of waiting for what's going to happen with Matt Dumba. He's still a Dallas Star, right? I don't think that we expect that right now. What's the cap that they have left? Do they have anything left, or are they sitting?
No, they're negative 1.8, I think 1.7 something right now. So they are well behind the cap at this moment. But I think if they were to buy him out, I think that would cover it. So right now they don't have to make any specific moves, that is their last resort to get out of that would be a buyout of someone like Matt Dumba. But they do not have any space to do anything. But again, remember, I don't know if Goldson said it or we were talking about it, but they don't have to be cap compliant until the day that they get to the season, right? So
right. But they're not even at the 10% threshold yet. They can be 10% over before the season starts, right? So they're not there yet. They're still good there. So, does that mean that there's somebody out there that the unfortunate thing is who's left? Like even if you were interested in Ehlers, now he's a Carolina. I think, I don't know. Some may say that they won the free market thing, but their open market, and with all the free agents and things like that. But I again, to answer your question, they're not any better, but I'm not saying they're any worse. And so they're still a good team. And I do think that they're obviously looking for something. I don't think they're perfect scenarios for Sam Steele to play left wing on number 2 line. I mean, I don't think that's a bad spot for him to be in and out of. And I've never been a fan of playing players out of position, even though there are some that can. And I know Matt Duchene has been discussed about playing on the wing and Wyatt moving up and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it didn't sound like that's exactly what Glenn Gullickson had in mind. So, no, they're not any better. I don't think they're any worse, only because I think there's a couple players that have another level to get to, a couple younger guys. So,
yeah. Do you think, like, the big conversation so far with us when we met with Jim Nill, when he spoke for the coach, when he spoke after free agency, development camp, all that stuff, his main line has been kind of throughout this beginning of the offseason that they already made their big moves, right? They brought in Rantanen was the biggest, right? They brought in Rantanen. We talked about re-signing Wyatt Johnston, re-signing Harley, re-signing Lindell, re-signing Jake Ottinger. How much of that you're great at reading whether that is kind of the way they're saying it or whether that's the real way that we should look at it. Is that just how fans just need to look at this and just say this team made their big splash, they went for it all, and now we're seeing the other side of it where they are going to have to move a little space here in order to move forward? Like they just don't have the money unless they make some big trade to really improve the roster. So how much of that whole we already made our big moves is the reality?
I think that's reality, but I do think that by them not really taking, and we don't know if they took a swing at any of these other guys, and sometimes you do hear some rumors, but I think what they do, why wouldn't you start to look at the Florida Panthers? And the Florida Panthers didn't jump out of the gate. They weren't playing for first overall all year long. Their chemistry, their additions, the way that they built that team over the season. Actually, even some of those guys even had a slow start, but there was no panic there. So I think what Dallas would probably do, especially mainly because of where they are money wise, is they're going to pull something else off at some point during the season. And like I said this before, I really prefer to do it the way that Jimmy Rutherford has already done it when he was in Pittsburgh, when he's in Vancouver, is he always jumped out ahead of that trade deadline. I think Jim will be doing his work from now until whenever there is an addition. I believe that's what will happen. Again, maybe something happens where this team just clicks together under Gully and they just get that win behind them with a new coach bump and some guys are able to jump up there. Maybe we see Sam Steele be a 22 goal scorer playing on the left wing this year. So, but I think what they do is they have their target players that they would like to be able to add. And maybe it's just player that they feel. I would think right now what they're doing is they're looking for a number 2 left winger. That seems to be where the hole is if Robo's going to play up there. And to me, or are you looking for a different kind of player, like a Granlund kind of player, and Robo fits in with Duchene and Tyler Seguin, and maybe you find that Granlund type, if there is one like that out there that can slide in up there. So, but I think we should be expecting rumors to happen during the course of the year that they're looking at this guy and that guy. And when, Gully went into that meeting with his 1% line, right? And I'm sure that was with Jim also, basically saying, and Gullickson can say that because he coached against him, right? So they know the kind of team. They know every team has an identity. And sometimes the identity is split up into 2 or 3 or 4 different kinds of phases and plays and players and the way that they play. And I think when you look at, what we talked about on our last show is when, to Gully, actually, I think I brought it up to him, is when you're sitting 32nd in the NHL when it comes to hits given, and you're sitting at 32nd in the NHL of hits taken, you look at those things and that's something that's got to change. And I think that's one of his little areas that he would like to improve. So my opinion is they're looking for one of those kind of players. And I think we believe that Liam Bishop will take another step. I think he took a couple steps during the season. So you've got that guy on the back end. And you ultimately, I think you can add another player like that possibly. But I think with Liam, it's not where you just want one of those kind of guys. There was a couple guys out there that got picked up I thought would have fit in nicely. But again, maybe it had to do with dollars. So I just believe that they're going to keep their eye open, obviously, aiming to add at least one kind of heavier forward that can play maybe in that number 2 spot on the left side.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like the hope, at least from this team, is that 1% and that coaching change is going to be enough to do that. Whether it's one more player that they need to add to do it, but it doesn't feel like it's not an overhaul, right? And I'm curious if you believe that that's enough to get. Like, this team doesn't need to be the most physical team in the NHL. They have a ton of skill. They can score goals. They can hopefully defend a little more structured this way around, as we know with the system before that with man-to-man. But I'm just curious if you think it's enough to get them. Like, if let's say they get, I don't know if it's 1%. Let's say they get a 5 to 10% bump in their physicality, and like Lillison said, that's not running around and throwing body checks in open ice. That's going through guys on the forecheck. That's a little harder in the battles in front of the net. That's making sure the other team knows you're there, and this makes it a little harder to play against. If they get 5 to 10% more of that, is that enough for this team to take the next step?
I think so. I mean, because again, look at how the deficiency that we felt, the physicality being one, maybe the system, and Gully did mention that in his meeting. He had a tweak or two that he wanted to use in the defensive zone. He mentioned that. So there's obviously something that they've seen there that he would like to try a different way. So I think that if you get a player or two that takes another step, and you've got guys that are still motivated, we're starting with the captain and obviously Duchesne and Sagan, guys like that, your leaders. I think that they can drag everybody up another level. But I do think with a couple tweaks when it comes to, because again, we haven't even mentioned Jake. Jake is going to continue to get better, so Jake is wherever that number is, top 3, top 4 goaltender in the NHL. So I believe that if you play a little bit differently in front of him and make things a little bit more predictable, and you don't have to worry about what's going to happen over here so much or what happens over here, and things are just where they're supposed to be in front of you, and you make that save, that I believe that Jake will be that guy, and things will be a little less chaotic at times in front of him. So with those kind of changes, I think you know what? I look at Edmonton. Yeah, they got to the finals again, but I don't know. I mean, you look at some of the players that kind of carry. I mean, when Perry was one of their better players, and McDavid and Draisaitl actually, it's not that they weren't good players, but they didn't dominate, right? And so what Edmonton did is they added some kind of depth to that, and they added a little bit different structure that we saw in their own zone, where they packed everything in, and it was difficult getting scoring chances and getting second shot chances at chance or opportunities. So I just think that, if it would have been the same thing at the other end, because we know that if Jake didn't have to make some of these unbelievable saves and then get kind of hung out to dry it a couple times, that he is I just believe he's a better goaltender than what Edmonton has at the other end of the rink. And I think with that kind of structure, Jake is going to be even better this year. And so I hope that the goals against comes down by maybe a half a goal a game. And I think that makes a difference. And now you're maybe not really relying on finding another hired gun. You're just going to be more difficult to play, very similar to what Florida has, although it's hard to say that they don't have game changers. They have a lot of luxuries there. So I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are looking at that. So hopefully those couple tweaks get them to where they want to land a little bit deeper next season.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up Jake, because the conversation from Nil and Pete and everything is that Jake's only scratching the surface. And I know he's not 21 anymore, right? So he can't just keep scratching the surface. But the fact that people are even saying that he hasn't hit his potential yet, and he's still usually right behind Hellebuck in most of these stats that you're looking at, and he's finding ways to win games despite his team sometimes being chaotic in their own end and things like that. So the fact that you could think he could take another step, and this team could maybe get a little more better and structured defensively, is just wild to think of how much better they could be, because they don't, maybe that's all they need. Maybe this team, instead of scoring 4 a game but allowing 3 or whatever it was, when they were a little bit rough in the defensive end, maybe they drop their goals down by half, but they also drop their goals against, and that makes you a little harder to play against in those tight games. And I think that could make a difference. But let's hit the blue line, because I see a ton of comments here about the blue line. So I'm curious about your thoughts on the Dallas Stars blue line, and if they're getting any better next on DLLS.
Just like your favorite team needs a home ice advantage, your home needs a home floor advantage, and Empire Today can help. Empire Today has dedicated flooring professionals who focus on flooring every single day. Empire Today lives and breathes flooring, and they're with you every step of the way. It's a whole different ballgame. Get your measurements taken and have all your questions answered, so there are no more surprises. With Empire Today, you get clear, upfront, and all-inclusive pricing, plus you can schedule installation as soon as next day. Schedule a free in-home estimate today, because some things are just better at home. DLLS listeners can receive a $350 discount when using promo code DLLS. That's right, $350 off with code DLLS. Restrictions apply.
Thanks, LUDS. Let's move it over and talk about Owen's favorite topic, which is shady rays. I'm out here in Southern California, and you need a lot of sunglasses. You need sunglasses pretty much wherever you go, similar to Dallas, but even better because you're heading out to the beach out here, which I love. You know the moment when you realize you left your favorite pair of sunglasses at that beach, on the roof of your car, at the gas station, or wherever it might be, and you're worried that you're not going to be able to replace them, because replacing sunglasses can be expensive. But then Shady Rays makes it simple. They change the game. They're made for real life. They're seriously good looking. They're polarized, durable, and they're not stupidly expensive. And the craziest part, if you lose or break your sunglasses, even on the first day, as I probably would have, Shady Rays will send you a brand new pair. No guilt trip, just replacements. Now you can actually wear your sunglasses. You don't have to buy the cheap pair from CVS and to wear to a party or to the beach or at LUDS on the lake, rip it on the Sea-Doo. You can wear your favorite sunglasses anywhere you want, on hikes, at concerts, on the boat, wherever, and not worry about them. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com and use the code DLLS35 for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right, LUDS. We're talking about the left wing and some other things in the front, and I'm looking at the comments on our show here, and people are saying, what about the blue line? And I'm really curious, because this blue line has had issues before, right? We've talked about this team needing someone to finally play with Miro, or when Miro was out, we need someone to step in and fill his role. Now this team is expected to go in healthy. They have Miro Heiskanen, Thomas Harley. They brought back Nils Lundqvist. They obviously have Esa Lindell. Liam Bichel took a big step. We just talked about Dumba. We know Petrovic is an option. I'm curious your thoughts on where this blue line stands going into the season, if they were not to make any further moves.
Yeah, if they don't make any moves, and I think the time that we all know that, there's a lot of talk that Miro, they want to get him to the left side of the ice. I think he's proven that he can play on both sides effectively. So it would not bother me at all that you've got Esa and him together. That's what I think your first pair should be. And I think that slots in Harley on that number 2 left side. And then you got Liam Bichel there, and so I just think that those are your big 3 and a half. I think Bichel's going to be obviously part of that big 3, big 4. So I think that's the spot for those 4 guys. Now, are we good with what we're looking at, and how many times has a little guy now gotten that opportunity? And I think he's healthy. right? Can he be a partner? I don't know if he should be on the number 2 pair, to be honest with you. I mean, Lyubushkin seems to be a guy with the weight and everything that I think you would like to have against some bigger players and be able to try to match that up. And I think if you could put Lyubushkin with Harley, you know, and Lyubushkin could get back to being that steady guy. Don't worry about jumping up in the play. Use your size. Harley would kind of be the Miro of that pair. You know, transporting the puck up ice. He always makes a good first pass. Allow him to get a little bit more involved. I mean, he takes his opportunities, and I think Lyubushkin then knows he's that good partner that stays at home and does those other kind of things. You know, and then you've got that third pair, and I think that's the way you're going to run. I really don't see, after everything that went on there. But again, with a different coach, will Matt Dumba get an opportunity? If they can't move him, can that be that guy? And I think there were times when Dumba was good. You know, at times when he played with Bischel, he was fine. And I think when he dumbed it, that's kind of, I didn't mean it like that.
That was good.
When he dumbs his game down a little bit and just keeps it simple, he doesn't shy away from any kind of physical play. I just think sometimes the system and the way that they're wanted to play the game, and they see how everybody's trotting and getting up ice, getting involved in the play. Sometimes you have to talk to certain defensemen and say, that's not necessarily how I want you to think you're going to play. I need you to be able to defend, make a good outlet pass. You know, the time and score dictates a lot of things when you're going to jump into the play. And, you know, in that case, I think that's where Dumba could be okay. But I don't know. But like I said, when you've got a different coach that comes in there, they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's different. You know, when you get traded and, you know, or a new coach comes in, everything starts out all over. And that goes for the second line guys and the third line guys also. I mean, you can't just say, well, I've been in the top 6 the last 3 or 4 years. Well, you have another coach coming in, and that's where the big dead cat bounce or the coach bump comes into play, because most of those players know that philosophy that, hey, we got a new guy here. I got some rope before and I was playing 18 minutes a night. You know, I don't hold up my end of the deal. This guy may have me replaced with some other guy that he's had in the past, and because he knows exactly what he gets with that player. So yeah, there's no question that but I will say this, if the structure in the own zone changes, gets tweaked a little bit, your D pairs are going to be better, because they're not going to be scrambling all over the zone. Yep. And they're going to have more support from, especially their centerman, but they're going to have more support in their own zone.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Is the big question, 2 ones for me are, how much can this new? We don't even know what Goldson's going to do, but we imagine it will probably not be man-on-man chasing around your zone. That's the guess, especially with what he's seen coaching on the other side against them and seeing how they exploited it. So the question is, for those guys that are on that, I'm not going to call it the fringe, but the guys who aren't, you know, the solidified main 4, we assume Haskin and Harley Lindell and Bischel have taken pretty much the role that we know what we're going to get from them. Bischel still has plenty to grow, and we expect him to get better. But for the Lyubushkins and the Lundqvists and Dumba, can that little shift just make things easier? You know, the main thing we saw from Matt Dumba that people were like, oh God, we got to trade Matt Dumba, was he would get lost a little bit, right? You'd be like, what is he doing in that play? Why is he over there? Maybe he just got exposed because he doesn't play well in that system. Maybe you teach him to stay at home, and you teach him, he's a strong guy. He's a physical guy. Tell him he can stand in front of the net, move guys around, and play a simpler game. I imagine he's able to take a step and be at least a good, you don't need the best player on your third pairing here, right? We're not talking about someone who's going to fill in on the left, on the right of Miro Heiskanen, which is what they tried to do with Dumba to start the season last year. We're talking about someone to come in and be a serviceable defenseman. And I think the Stars have basically 3 number 1 defensemen. So you don't need your other 3 to be the best of the best. You need them to be serviceable. You need them to be there to cover for your more offensive guys in Heiskanen and Harley. And I'm curious whether that system can change a little bit. The other one for me, and you just mentioned it, when I'm writing out pairings and lines and stuff, there's a few guys that you don't want to keep them safe, but you want to keep them with someone you feel comfortable with, right? You like someone like a young defenseman. You're not going to put Bischel necessarily with another rookie, right? You don't want that kind of pairing. Does Niels Lundqvist need to get out of that category? Because for me, when I'm writing it down, I'm thinking, Bischel Lundqvist seems like it would be a good idea for your bottom of your pairing, but do you want those two there, or do one of them need a more experienced or higher level defenseman? Should we just assume Niels Lundqvist has to take that step so he's no longer in that spot if he's going to keep a roster spot here?
I think that if Nils gets that opportunity there, let's say Dumba's gone, or maybe Dumba's number 7, or whatever it may be, Nils just has to be who he is. He has to play to his strength. His first strength is his skating ability. There's no question about it. He moves the puck well. And to be able to play, and that's why I think the partners complement each other. Like, he can be the guy that does more of the skating, following up the play close. And it's not, don't want to take that away from Bischel because he skates well also, but all of a sudden he understands that if both of us are going to try to get up in the play, that's not going to be for me right now. That's Nils. Nils is that guy up there, and I kind of make sure that I kind of cover things. And if you're down by a goal, I expect Nils to be that guy that jumps in there. Or it could be with that pair, Nils has to recognize if it's Liam that's going up there, then he has to be the guy back. So you're not creating things at the other end of the rink. Ultimately, when those kind of pairings get together, and it was kind of when I don't want to say Chelly, because Chelios was such a good player at both ends of the rink, but Chelly, liked to jump into the play, and especially like Zubov liked to jump into the play. That you just have to be able to play a good outnumbered rush, because there's going to be the times that they get involved in the play. You're going to have to face outnumbered rushes, and you have to be good at defending them. And everybody has to remember, players have to remember, a 2-on-1 isn't just a 2-on-1. It's a 2-on-2 because your goalie counts. So you play it a certain way and make sure your goaltender gets the easier save or easier shot. But I think when you look at those pairs, it would be the same thing for me. If Dumba was there, Dumba doesn't have to be that as offensive, let's say, as Nils would be, but that pair itself would just be really hard to play against. They would be like, I'm looking at our fire pit out there, and in the summer, you got the flies and the mosquitoes then the gnats flying around. That's what they got to be like. They got Dumba, especially. Leon's going to be a big, strong, seal people out. But Dumba never backs down from pushing and getting involved in things. So I just think that, if it were those two guys, or regardless of who it is, that third pair, they have to be just one of those kind of pairs that's hard to play against, like where people don't want to play against them. And they're not going to be dangerous from an offensive standpoint, but one from Bischel, if you're coming in on his side, you're probably going to get a hit. Well, that means that your partner has to know how to defend certain things, because things are going to start coming over to your side of the ice because they're afraid of that guy over there. So, I think regardless who plays next to Leon, I think that can be a really effective pair. That could be a pair when you have 3 pairs. It could be a pair that pushes you over the edge, because now there shouldn't be a weak spot when it comes to playing in your own zone, which we go back to the way that hopefully we see them play. They're going to have more support.
Yeah. Do you think Nils? I don't know how even I know the right way to ask it, but is this his last kind of big shot here? Like, this reminds me of a player who, if let's say he went this year and next year, maybe got a chance here or somewhere else next year, and it just never really clicked. He was kind of in and out of the lineup. This feels like a kind of player that goes and plays in Europe, right? Because it just didn't work here. Does this kind of feel like you got to show it this year that you are taking the next step and you are you don't need to be a top 3, but a top 6 NHL defenseman?
I guess for me, it's kind of hard to answer that, because up close and personal, we haven't had a great opportunity to watch him play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, whether it was a coach's decision, now it was an injury. So we really haven't seen what he can do with a healthy diet of being well enough to play every game, and also play with the coach that allows him to play. And I don't hear it seem like Pete didn't seem comfortable with him at times, especially when you get around the playoff time and he's not playing, or he's playing 4 minutes a night. And not only is that bad on him, it's bad on the other 5 guys that have to live in that world too. So, just because if it doesn't work here, and it's the same kind of thing where he's in and out of the lineup, but he keeps coming back. I mean, he says, I'll come back. So
he obviously likes it,
comfortable with something, right? So, but it doesn't mean that he couldn't go play on another team. I just want to see him get a fair chance, where if it's not here, then maybe he's a piece that gets moved, but in order for him to get moved and get any kind of value out of him at all, you have to let him play. You have to see the scouts watch him play. You have to be able to know what he can do and say, hey, we could use this piece. Now maybe then you get a little bit more for him. But I just think he's one of those kind of players, and I don't want to sell him short, and I'm not putting him over the top until we can get. I just want to see him play 40 games in a row. 40, 50 games in a row. Let's see what we have.
Get a shot. Yeah, I think he deserves it. I think he's earned that, right? He definitely earned some of Pete's trust back last season. Then he gets the injury, but he as Robert was talking about I think it was on our draft show, he put on a bunch of weight. He looks way stronger than he did. He's motivated. He seemed more confident. He was making simpler plays, and the big one for me is whether he's gone the full offense route when he first came in, right? And he was getting exposed defensively. Then he kind of got ripped and benched, and he went the opposite way, where he was much better defensively, but he didn't have any of his offensive game. They need a little bit of both. They don't need him rushing up and scoring 15 goals, but they need him to use his legs to beat the forecheck or get up ice and join a rush once in a while. They're going to need a little bit of that. So can he find that middle ground and build on it? I think that's the most important thing here. So we will talk plenty more about that, though, as we go forward here. Let's move on to the next. We will have a fun question involving LUDS pal Joe Nieuwendyk and MODANO next.
But first, we're heading to Vegas. No, we're not heading to Vegas. It's the other guys across the hall. Heading to Vegas with the true fan travel for the ultimate fan experience that we will not be a part of. DLLS is taking over the Strip for an unforgettable weekend in Vegas, and you need to be there. Join us all, meaning the Cowboys, as the Cowboys take on the Raiders on November 17th in Las Vegas with our DLLS Stars crew. This is an all-inclusive resort. Game tickets, VIP parties. VIP parties is the reason we should be going, Sam, regardless if we're part of this whole read or not. Exclusive events with the DLLS crew and fellow diehard fans and much, much more. This is how Dallas does Vegas. Book now at truefantravel.com.
And you get to see John Anderson if you get on that trip, because he bailed on us to go to Vegas. Thanks, lads. Speaking of games and trips, let's talk about game time. The U.S. national team lost to Mexico in the Gold Cup final yesterday, so that one is over. But the FIFA Club World Cup, I believe is how you call it, is going on right now. And it's a perfect time to use Game Time to get tickets with 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup games. Game Time makes it easy for getting tickets. Down to the app, it's super simple. You can look at the all-in pricing. There are no surprise fees, and you get last-minute tickets for great prices. I've used it with Katie. I've used it with friends. When you're thinking, you know what, I think I want to go to a game tonight, that's the perfect time to use Game Time for all events. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code DLLS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code DLLS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed, because it is always game time when you're with DLLS. No idea why this was on my mind today. Honestly, it's not the reunion anniversary of it. There's no reason for it. But I woke up this morning thinking about Joe Nieuwendyk not re-signing like MODANO in 2010. And MODANO obviously going on to the Detroit Red Wings and ended up retiring soon after that. I'm curious, I'm going to leave it open-ended here, but my first general question is, that was the transition right before actually Goldson came in, the bankruptcy, the all the things going on. If you're Joe Nieuwendyk, do you bring back Mike MODANO? And if you're Joe Nieuwendyk today, do you regret the decision not to?
Today, I would think that Nui would regret it today. I think, to be honest with you, I think Nui regretted it the day that it happened. And again, you mentioned it. It wasn't a good time in Dallas Stars land, right? And so the finances weren't where they were supposed to be running all the shots. And I think that I don't know what the conversation would have been between the two, but I would have to think when you're on, you're a teammate of the guy, you win a championship together. I would think you're going up to Mike and saying, Mo, listen, you're our guy. But it's the guy behind the curtain that isn't allowing this kind of money to be, to be allocated. And so I'm sure it was a tough decision for him. But I think at the end of the day, when you've got, regardless if it's Joe or anybody else, he has a job to do, and it's his first job as being a general manager. And unfortunately, it was his last job. I think he was involved, but with teams, but it wasn't in the chair that he probably wanted to be in. And I don't know, as far as being a general manager, you would hope that they all knew what all the circumstances were. But I can tell you, I don't think Mo has a mean body or bone in his body. I just don't think I've never seen it if he does. So to this day, I couldn't tell you that there's anything harsh between them. But I think at times Mo has been disappointed in his career, and that shouldn't even happen against, no matter who you're with. I mean, I think that after what happened in Detroit, Mo let that whole not coming back under Joe's lead go, because when that clown sits Mike out and he never got game 1500, I think Mo's sitting at 1499. To me, that's probably never going to go away from Mike, although he's got a couple different awards that he can lean back on. The guy's in the Hall of Fame, and he's an all-time guy here, and now he's over there with Billy Guerin in Minnesota. He's got a statue. So I think if there was anything between him and him, Mo and Nui, I don't think there was, but there's nothing lingering there, is my opinion.
Yeah. So you just mentioned it.
I'd like to know why, though, you wake up and think about something that happened 15 years ago, and it was about two dudes. What's that all about?
Dreaming of random things, I just think of random topics. If I brought up everything on this show that I thought of, I would get just squirrel on top of squirrel. I'm already referenced as the squirrel on this show. So, but I'm curious, you just brought it up. Do you think, we know that the situation, we know the cap, all that, we know, does MODANO work with the Stars in some capacity? Does he have more of an influence? Is he living in Dallas if he never moves on? If he does get re-signed, and let's say he plays 2 more years and he retires a Dallas Star, is he still in Minnesota doing what he's doing, or is he a Lukey type, legend hero in Dallas? Does that change his future at all if that situation goes differently?
I think Mo is always going to be that guy here in Dallas, but I will say that my opinion is Mo would have rather end everything here. Now, he's had plenty of opportunities to do things, although that you got to think Minnesota's remote, that he enjoys the role that they have him in. It's probably the perfect one for him. Like, I remember when we went over, my buddy owned the Allen Americans up the road, and so I went in there and I brought in Matt Tkachuk, Belfour, Steve Duchesne was there, and so Steve said I hired Steve Martinson as a coach, and then the owner, he goes, "Well, what about Mo?" And I'm like, "What about Mo?" I mean, like, "Doug, do you expect us to work when we're here and get things done and be here?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that won't be Mike." Mike, Mo's kind of got all of his things behind him, and Mo was every 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure it was on the 1st and the 15th, and that's when Mo came around. So he picked up his check, but whenever I asked him to come in and help us out, and then ultimately we won a championship there our first year. So that was nice to be able to do that with those guys. I think Mike, if everything would have worked out, I believe you'd want to be here. I mean, this is golf and weather here, right? Not that he doesn't have other places, but I think, being drafted and being that first overall in Minnesota and all that other kind of stuff that went around in the start of his career in Minnesota, that's pretty close to him too. And I think him and Billy were, they were teammates here in Dallas. So he knew that relationship, and he's friends with the owner and all that kind of stuff. I think it all worked out. Norm Green loved him too, and Norm was the owner in Minnesota at the time, and then brought him for us here. I just think Mike is such an easy-going kind of guy. He's okay regardless where he's at. Now he's got a tribe there for a family, so that's kind of keeping him busy now. So if Mo wants to be in Dallas and enjoy some Dallas weather, I think he can handle that too. He's in town. I don't go to see him, but he doesn't really come to see me. We text every once in a while. I'll send him something about coming on and things like that. And so I think like it's probably like that with all teams that win championships. It's not like you just drift apart and never talk to each other, because there's events that get you back together, and it's amazing how you might not talk to a guy for a year, but you just pick it up as soon as you see him, right where you left. It's amazing. Every time I've seen Mo, regardless of in a game, out of a game, after a game, before a game, or a year later, it's the same smile when he sees you. He doesn't have there's no worries in the world for Mike.
Yeah, how you've talked about him as a teammate, and as obviously got to see and had it taken away. And I know that was a big conversation. How was he as a leader, whether he had a letter on his chest or not, in the room?
Mo led the way he played. He was not a rah-rah guy. We didn't want him to be a rah-rah guy. And I think part of that, when he got the C, we were all kind of like, really? Mo, because Mike doesn't stand up and call players out. And that's both things that come along with that. And all us guys that had the letters, like, everybody knew you didn't have to have a C. You're okay to be able to do your thing. And personally, for me, I think Mo just wanted to play hockey. And just let me go. Let me do my thing. And he always did his thing, right? And I think now when you start having, you're like, oh, wait now. So that guy's not playing well, and I need to go up to him and say something, or I need to be in, and I got to talk to Hitch. And so I got to go in and have meetings with Hitch. I just think he's the guy that just let him do whatever he wants. And we don't need that. We don't have to have that from Mike, because for us, the way he led was the way that he played the game. And how many games that, and you could just see him, like, it didn't matter how the game was going. You saw a smirk every once in a while, but for the most part, it was always that smile. You remember the smile when Mo played, and you remember the jersey flapping in the wind right behind him. So the game and in the locker room and stuff like that, Mo didn't need to have that pressure put on him too.
Yeah. Was he, what would you say, is he top 5 best players you played with?
I'd put him in the top couple. I mean, I just the things that he was able to do in an era when it was hard for those guys to do it, and you talk about, the guys that were getting tugged on, and Mary Lemieux and guys like that. And you should have been in prison for some of the things that you could, like, that was the thing. That was the thing with all those guys, all those good players that were, you were after their ankles all the time and the back of the legs, and it was just a dirty game. And Mike was able to accomplish the numbers that he did in that era and fight through all that kind of stuff. And he made it look easy sometimes, So those kind of players that played in that era, what we tried to do to them during the course of a game, that are recognized as being the best of all time.
Yeah, I wonder, you mentioned, I wonder if the team players nowadays would benefit if you were just like, hey, you know what? Let's take this current Dallas Stars team. You're going to go to have a week training camp, and we're going to play the way against you that it was played in the 90s or the early 2000s. We're going to grab, we're going to hook, we're going to, do all those things to you. Teach them how to fight through what, let's be honest, real contact was. I think it could make them better players to fight through, because you look at stuff today and you're like, how is he not getting to the net? Yeah, sure, the guy's putting his stick on him, but he's not actually doing anything. And players, they just never learn, it seems like, to get through that because they don't have to. Would that be a fun little, training camp, go out there and play?
It would be fun. It would be fun for us. It would be fun for us. I just think after about a day and a half of that kind of a boot camp, there'd be a conga line up to Jim Nill's office and saying, I want out. It's just not in
Yeah.
it's just different there. And I've said this so many times. Do I wish the game was back there? Do I want to see that? Yeah, but the speed and skill of the game now is ridiculous. It's so entertaining.
Yeah.
And so much of this now it's even more than it was before. It's about the people that are paying the tickets to come in, and Dallas does a great job of putting on a good show from the locker room guys to the rest of the staff upstairs.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have plenty more. We're going to talk about the Texas Stars next on DLLS. First, Luds, we're going to talk about being a diehard because
Well, I know where it is too. It's right there.
let's be got your QR. It's actually on my screen. It's to the other side on you. So I don't know why it's always flipped, but there you go. Just do both.
Well, am I not pointing at it on your screen?
No, you're pointing at the other corner on my screen.
No way. So you're over here? Well, you can't
I'm
see
over
me.
there. Yeah.
Oh, it's over there.
Oh, we're all backwards.
All right.
All right. Being a diehard is the best option. You get tons of benefits when you become a diehard. You can become a diehard to get all the writing we get from everybody, my writing, Sean's writing on the Stars, but also writing across the Texas Rangers, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Mavericks. You get discount on merch. You get discount on the trip we were just talking about when that DLLS crew heads out to Vegas for the Cowboys against the Raiders. You get access to the Discord, which we will use, I'm sure, over the next couple of shows here with LUDS. We got to do a damn Discord, so maybe we will do that without Owen here and really let the things off the rails. But you get discounts on merch. As I mentioned, we have plenty of new merch. We have the Jake Ottinger shirt, which is still my favorite shirt, and I'm being told by the GM of our crew that is getting delivered to me shortly, so I can join the other boys in wearing that. We have one of the highest selling shirts, which is the Finnish Mafia shirt for all the Finns in Dallas. We have the Wyatt 6-bit and the Mikko finisher shirt, which I think the Mikko one is one of my favorites, as well as the playoff shirts, the Captain and the Moose. There's plenty to go around. But one other thing we have going on right now is the Ball Knower bonus. Now, the Ball Knower bonus is pretty simple. For the MLB All-Star game coming up, you pick which side wins. National League, American League. Let's surprised I knew the two conferences of the baseball. You pick which one wins. Go on to our site at ALLCITY, buy something from the DLS shop, and then we will send you, if you get it correct, we will send you a gift card for that option. So you basically get an option to get some free apparel, some free gear, and have some fun along the way. So become a DLS diehard today because there are plenty of reasons to do so. LUDS, some news in the AHL down in Cedar Park today. The Texas Stars named Toby Peterson their new head coach, taking over for Neil Graham, as we know, who will be an assistant with Dallas. Toby Peterson played for the Dallas Stars right around that era we were just talking about. That I think he was started around 2007. Played for them for about 4 seasons. Won the Calder Cup with the Texas Stars. Won the Calder Cup as a coach as well. He's got tons of NHL experience. He's got AHL experience. He was an assistant in the AHL for a long time, and he's been working the past few seasons as a skills coach with the Colorado Avalanche in the NHL. So I'm going to read what Jim Nill said here about Toby, and then we will jump into what you think of the hire. Jim Nill, in his statement today, said, "We're pleased to name Toby as the head coach of the Texas Stars. Toby brings over 22 years of professional hockey experience to the Stars bench. He's been successful as a player in both the AHL and NHL and has held coaching positions in both leagues. Toby understands what it takes to build and develop a championship caliber team, as he's been part of winning a Calder Cup as a player and coach, and his familiarity with our organization is invaluable. He will no doubt help us continue the culture that has been established in Cedar Park." So with all that being said, LUDS, thoughts on the hire and memories or things you know about Toby Peterson?
See, it's funny. Like he's paid his dues first off, right? So,
Yep.
But I think about it when you tell me that he's been a skills coach, right? So Petey played just under 400 games in the NHL. He got 81 points. Wait a second, and you're a skills coach? But what I remember of Petey is that like a third line guy. You know what I mean? The glue guys, the guys that you can put out there at different times of the game and not have to worry about them. They're the responsibility. Like to be a responsible player when you're not, in your top 3, top 4 players on the team becomes even more important than anything else, because you have to be able to be trusted. And so I think what Petey would bring to an American League program and the players that are trying to get here is to sell them on all that kind of stuff. Like, listen, you're probably not going to be this kind of guy, But if you want to play in the league and you want to stay in the league, you have to be able to do these things. You know, you're a winger, you got to play on the wall, you got to get pucks out of the zone, you got to be able to, you know, pick up coverage and all the little details of the game that allow. I mean, there's, you know, there's so many of us that there's no reason we should have been in the game for so long, but we were willing to put the work in all the areas of the game. And because you just can't rely on, I mean, you talk about Mike, if Mike could have been the worst plus minus guy every single year if he wanted to be, and he'd still be in the league because he could just put points up and he could score. But, you know, when, to his credit, when Hitchcock, you know, challenged him to be a guy that could play against the top centerman on the other side, and kill penalties, Mo bought in. And then Mo became an even better player. And then Mo all of a sudden understood that, well, now he's out there 4 or 5 minutes more a night, because when a certain line would come out there, you would always get pulled off because they didn't want you out against that line. Now, you know, you can go ahead because he's used to, like guys like Mike were used to playing against that third line, so-called. I would always call them our second line because I always felt like they were just as important as a top scoring line, the checking line to shut guys down. But he would have to fight through all that stuff. Then all of a sudden, when he found that he was going to be against the Forsbergs and, you know, all the top centermen in the league, he's like, well, now I'm out here twice as much. And then you learn how to kill penalties. So those are the little things that I think a coach like Peterson will come in and do, and he's just going to help. Again, I go back to Jordy, Jordy Ben, you know, and I think when Jordy got hired to work with those guys there's so many little details and conversations and how you're in and out of the lineup at times, and you only play 8 minutes a night, and you know where you came from before you were drafted, possibly you're playing 20-25 minutes a night, and you're playing all different situations, and it kind of hits you between the eyes, you know, like for those good players, like, wait a second, how now I'm drafted in the second round and I can't play against these guys? Well, you have to learn how to play against it because you're in the American League, and it's going to even get tougher. So, you know, there's a lot of guys that spend a lot of time in the American League, and for some way they never really find a lot of time in the NHL, but they still end up having a great career. And I think those are the kind of guys that you need. I've said it for a long time. When Gretz was coaching, I never got it. I didn't get it. And there's very few superstar players that have become good NHL coaches. And I believe that the reason for that is things came to those guys easy. And when they played games, they were able to get through games, and they did this and they did that. They didn't have to worry about a lot of the other details of the game because they were just so damn good. Now all of a sudden they become coaches, and like those guys would come to the rink and they'd spend their 2.5 hours a day, and they'd go out there and they go through a practice, and then they get into a game, and then they get there 25 minutes or whatever. They'd score a goal or two, and then they'd go home. Well, now all of a sudden when you're a coach, you got to be there 10 hours a day. And you got to do the practice. You got to talk to every guy. You got to teach it. They didn't have to do that. And so I think the guys that are the good coaches are the ones that were used to putting the time in all the time when you were a player, whether it was at the American League level or the NHL level. And that's what I think guys like Peterson bring. And they're just, what they are is they're that conduit between your career here and what you got to do to be able to be a player there, but not just play 150, 200 games in the NHL. Get there and play 600-700 games in the NHL and play there for 10, 11 years because of the details of the game.
Yeah, I think it's a great point because the familiarity is one thing when you know the organization, you know the players. But I think we talked about this on one of our shows with Glenn Goldson. The even more important is having someone who's got the same type of mindset that you need, that you want your team to have, right? We talked about Goldson having the mindset of we need to get over the hump. They've lost in Edmonton now 2 years in a row. He's got that hunger. He's got that intensity that he wants, motivation, all that. For guys like Jordy Ben, guy that you mentioned, guys like Peterson that were, you know, Jordy Ben was undrafted, Peterson drafted in the 9th round, basically one of the last picks that they could have made in that draft. You need that mentality, especially at the AHL level. It's not an NHL coach. Your job down there is development, right? I forget how Neil Graham worded it, but he used to always say, our number one job is to put this team and these players in a spot to go to the NHL. Our number 2 job is winning. So that's the order. Whereas the NHL, obviously, we know developing is not what they do. So you want someone there that's going to do that and have that mentality. And as you said, have that experience. So when it gets really hard, let's take Matej Blumel. Matej Blumel was someone who put in the work, got a couple of chances that didn't really work out, was really successful down there, and was a little frustrated. That's where the guys like Jordy Ben and Peterson can come in, and you have that sit down. You sit down, you're talking to them about it. That's where having that understanding can really go a long way. It can be, it make all the difference between a player giving up or wanting a new start or whatever, and a player sticking to it a little bit more. So the other thing about these AHL coaches and why this is such an important hire, obviously, the Goldson's the big headline grabber. The AHL, especially, Texas has been a huge feeder to this Dallas Stars team. Half of this roster were Texas Stars players. The way it is now, Texas is in a tough spot. Not only did the Stars just basically take all of their best players, they traded away Logan Stankoven, who was their best player. They took the AHL MVP and Maverick Bork. Now he's with them. They're likely going to use Ritzkovian for a large part of the season. I'm imagining at some point. You're in a tough spot here. You lose Blumel, your leading scorer. This is a tough spot to come into and try to get yourself back to that point of, we just went to the West Final. Let's get ourselves competitive again. How hard is that job to balance that? How hard do you think it is to balance the fact that, hey, I'm coming in here, I want our team to be successful, I want us to go on a run here at a Calder Cup, but I also understand that the better my players are, the quicker I'm probably going to lose them to the team up there in Dallas.
Well, I think that's understood when you come in, and I
Yep.
think what the message that is sent to a guy like Peterson, whoever comes in to coach these teams, is like, the most important thing is we want these players developed the right way. Now, with that being said, I'm hoping now that Toby Peterson is the new coach there, and Glenn Gullickson is the new coach with the Dallas Stars, that they have the same system and they work on the same things there as they do here. Because from what I understand, Neil Graham had a different kind of system in certain areas of the game than Pete DeBoer did, right?
Yep.
So I just think that if you want to give a player from the American League, when he gets his first chance or whenever it is to come up and they put you in place up here because of an injury or deserve it or whatever, you at least know how you're playing, how they're playing there. If you're playing something totally different, now what happens is, especially when you're getting your first kick at the can in the NHL, you start to think more than you react. And by the time you think and then you react, the play has kind of already happened. And sometimes you're on the outside looking in. But when I've always said, I use the example when I was at one scouting meeting in Peterborough in Canada with Bob Gainey and all the scouts in Dallas. And the only question I ever asked them, I'm like, well, because I wanted to know how they drafted their players. And they just said, best player available. And I said, okay. And I sat down and shut up. 10 minutes later, Gainey kind of had me stand up and goes, why'd you ask that question? I said, right now, Darian Hatcher has bad knees and Richard Matvichuk, blah, blah, blah. I said, and we believe in the system that we play and we're effective doing all the things that we're doing. It's just everybody's on the same page. Why aren't we looking for the next Darian Hatcher? Why aren't we looking for the next Matty or Daryl Sador at the time or Zubov? Mike MODANO's, of course, everybody's looking for them. But I think that when you're able to pull a player up in the American League, you plunk him into somebody's spot because somebody's injured, he doesn't really miss a beat. Probably not going to be as good as him, but at least you have the confidence that you don't have to go over something on the board with them 10 minutes before the game starts or in the morning skate and say, this is the way we play, by the way. You guys play totally different down there.
Yeah, you get that last minute call up, and I talked to a few guys in Petrovic, a few of the other guys that were there for a little bit, and they said the same thing. They said it's very similar, but there are a few changes. And you're right, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you want these guys to come right in, be able to play in your system and have success, and not just have success. Some of them we know are there for a certain amount of time because Tyler Seguin gets injured, you need a guy for 3 games. But it's also their shot to show what they can do when they are at that level, right? So you're hindering that player if you're sending up an Alex Petrovic and he's playing a totally different defensive system. You're going to hinder the way he looks. I mean, think of Kyle Capobianco when he came up for that 1 or 2 games. He looked completely out of place. That could have nothing to do with his skill level or defending. It could just be that he was put in a spot very quickly without a lot of warning, had to come up here, play a really kind of frantic system as you talk about, and didn't look good in it. And you're right. I don't think there's any reason to have a different system. Maybe your power play runs a little different thing here, and that doesn't really matter because the guy coming up for the AHL is not going to go on the power play, right? But keep the general system on both ends of the ice pretty similar. And I think the Stars did that before. I don't know if it was before Pete or maybe in Pete's first year. And then, as you said, Nilgren kind of shifted some things around. So I hope they go back to it as well, because I love to see how a guy comes in and plays with all the pressure, whether it's his debut or not, all the pressure, all the frantics of maybe a last minute day before call up, pressure of a game, playing against a superstar player on the other side. And I love to see how those guys take it and handle it, because I think it says a lot about them. You're not expecting them to come in and score 4 goals in their first game, but if they don't look overwhelmed, that usually says something about their future as an NHL player, because it means that they are not going to be overtaken by moments that are big. So I just think it's a good hire. Good for Toby Peterson to get a job that's not with skills development, as LUDS just said. Good for him to be here, and excited to talk to him a little bit throughout the season. LUDS, I can't believe it, but we did it.
I know.
We did an hour. We did it.
On who? On who?
Noto and Newkirk, no curse words. We did it, and we will be doing it again tomorrow.
Is Sean coming on this week at all?
I believe we're going to try to get Sean tomorrow or Wednesday for a little bit, if not the whole show. So we'll get some help. But all you guys listening, thanks for hanging out with us at DLS. We're going to do a LUDS Damn Discord either tomorrow or Wednesday. So I'll post in the Discord, but definitely submit your questions. Let's make it a real good one. And we will see you back tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m. Central Time, me and LUDS and who knows what else on DLLS Stars.
We all silly like the mayor.